At 79 years old, I learned that some people can begin arranging your silence while you are still standing in the kitchen, still making tea, still able to answer for yourself. The first sign came in a cream-colored envelope from the funeral home, the kind of envelope that tries very hard to look gentle. It had my name on it, my proper name, Eleanor Price, printed in blue ink above the address of the house where I had lived for 36 years. I was making tea when I saw it on the hall table. My hands were a little stiff that morning, and I remember thinking I would open it after breakfast, after my toast, after the kettle had stopped screaming. But something about the words on the outside made me put the kettle down. Updated arrangement confirmation. I had not updated anything. I had made my funeral wishes 5 years earlier, after my husband Thomas died, and after I watched his sister and 2 cousins nearly tear a chapel apart over flowers, hymns, and who had the right to sit in the first row. I did not make my plan because I was morbid. I made it because I had seen grief turn ordinary people into lawyers without papers. I wanted peace. I wanted my goodbye to be small, clear, and mine. Inside that envelope was a printed sheet telling me my memorial plan had been changed to a direct cremation. No chapel service, no obituary, beyond immediate family notice, and no burial beside Thomas. There was a line that said, "At family request, public gathering removed to avoid distress. Family request, not my request." That was the first time it hit me. I was still breathing, and someone had already started handling me like a problem to be tidied up. I stood in my kitchen with the paper shaking in my hand, and I did what many older people do before we allow ourselves to feel angry. I questioned myself first. Had I agreed to this during that winter when my blood pressure was strange? Had Michael said something at the hospital, and I nodded because I was tired? Had I forgotten a phone call? Had I signed something with my glasses off and my pride on? That is one of the cruel little tricks of age. Even when your mind is still yours, one tired day or one missed call gives other people a place to push their doubt. I read the letter 3 times. I read it until the words stopped making sense and started becoming a tone, that careful tone. That tone people use when they believe they are being kind by not asking you directly. I did not cry then. That came later. What I did was fold the letter along its original crease, set it beside my teacup, and sit very still. My kettle went cold before I moved. Thomas used to say I was the sort of woman who could make a decision look quiet. I do not know if that is a compliment or a warning, but he meant it tenderly. He knew I did not make a fuss unless a fuss had already been made in secret. Our house was not fancy. It was a narrow white place with blue shutters, 2 lilac bushes near the front path, and a back porch that leaned just enough to remind you not to dance on it. We bought it when Michael was 7. Thomas drove a delivery truck then, and I worked part-time at the library and took in small alterations from neighbors who trusted my hands more than the department store downtown. We were not rich, but we were orderly. Receipts in envelopes, tax papers in folders, birth certificates in the top drawer of the old cedar desk. People make jokes about older women keeping papers. They call it clutter. Maybe some of it is. But I have lived long enough to know that a folded paper in a drawer can be steadier than a person who does not want trouble. After Thomas died, the house became too quiet in places and too loud in others. The bedroom was quiet. The kitchen was loud with memory. I would turn and expect to see him reading the newspaper too close to his face, complaining that print had become smaller, when really his eyesight had become worse. I kept his chair in the corner by the window, because moving it felt like admitting something I was not ready to admit. Then one day I did move it, not because I was healed, but because I needed to vacuum behind it. That is how grief often is. Not grand, just dust where a chair used to be. I planned my service after that first year. Not all at once. I went to the funeral home on a Thursday because Thursday had always been our errand day. I wore my navy coat. I carried a notebook with questions written in my tidy hand. The funeral director at the time, a patient woman near my age, did not rush me. She asked what mattered. I told her, burial beside Thomas, the small chapel, no open casket, one hymn, one old poem my mother loved, and tea afterward in the library meeting room if it was available. I did not want a slideshow with music that would make people perform sadness. I did not want anyone arguing over whether I had been private or difficult. I wanted my own words placed in a sealed envelope with the plan because I knew my family. That may sound harsh. I do not mean it harshly. I only mean that people who love you can still decide they understand your life better than you do. Michael was my only child. I loved him before I knew his face, and I loved him through every stage that made him hard to love. His sharp teenage years, his proud young father years, his middle-aged habit of giving advice before asking questions. He was not a bad man. I need to say that early, because people like clean villains, and life rarely provides them. Michael could fix my porch light, take my car for an oil change, sit with me at the clinic when I asked. He sent me pictures of his garden. He called most Sundays, though sometimes he spoke to me the way one speaks to a device that needs updating. "Mom, you have to simplify," he would say. "Simplify the cupboards, simplify the bills, simplify the passwords, simplify the end." He married Jenna 9 years after his first marriage failed. Jenna was efficient in a way that impressed people at first. She had neat hair, neat handwriting, neat answers. She worked in event planning for a conference center, and she could organize a meal for 200 people without seeming to breathe. When Michael brought her to my house, she walked through my kitchen and said, "Eleanor, you keep such a charming home," which is the sort of compliment that has a lid on it. Still, I tried. I want my son to be happy. I wanted not to be the mother-in-law from a bad joke. Jenna brought me soup after my cataract surgery. She labeled my freezer meals in black marker. When my bank changed its online system and I could not get in without a code sent to my old email, she sat beside me and fixed it in 15 minutes. I was grateful. That is another small danger of old age. When you are grateful, you do not always notice what you have let someone else take over. The first time Jenna helped me with a password, I told myself it was nothing. The second time, she made a folder on Michael's laptop called Mom's Practical Stuff, and I laughed because it sounded harmless. By the third time, she knew which drawer held my insurance papers, which funeral home held my plan, and which people in town would listen if she used the right tone. I did not see control then. I saw competence. The memory incident happened in February, 6 months before the envelope arrived. I call it the memory incident because that is what everyone else made it, though at the time it was just a mistake. I missed my granddaughter Lily's birthday call. Not her birthday, I remembered the birthday. I had mailed the card 2 days early with a pressed violet inside because Lily used to pick them behind my shed when she was small. But I had written "Call Lily at 7" on the wrong square of my kitchen calendar, 1 square off. The next morning, I woke with the nasty little stab of knowing I had forgotten something important. I phoned her right away. Lily laughed softly and said, "Grandma, it's all right. I figured you fell asleep, But Jenna heard about it. Not from Lily, I think. From Michael, who mentioned it with no malice. A week later, when I could not find my checkbook because I had put it under the sewing basket, Jenna said, "No shame in having extra support, Eleanor. We all want to make sure your wishes are respected." It was a kind sentence. That was what made it dangerous. Because after that, if I objected to help, it looked like stubbornness. If I accepted help, it became evidence that I needed managing. And if I made one ordinary mistake, the mistake grew legs and walked ahead of me into rooms I had not entered yet. The funeral plan was one of those rooms. I called Michael the day the envelope came. My voice sounded careful even to me. "Did you change something with my funeral arrangements?" There was a pause. Not a confused pause. A pause with furniture in it. "Mom," he said, "we were going to talk to you about that." I sat down slowly. We, Jenna and I. We just felt the old plan might be too much. The burial, the service, your sister possibly showing up, people making speeches. We wanted to spare everyone stress. Everyone. It is a small word, but in a family meeting it can cover a whole person. I told him I had not asked to be spared. I told him burial beside. Thomas was not a decoration on a plan. It was the center of it. He sighed in that tired way grown children sigh when they think their old parent is choosing emotion over sense. "No one is trying to erase you," he said. I had not used that word. That is how I knew someone else had. Then he said the sentence that changed the weather inside me. "We've already decided it's better." I looked at my hand on the table. The veins had become more visible over the years, blue lines under thin skin, but it was still my hand. It had held Michael through fevers. It had signed school permission slips. It had buried a husband. It had written checks, letters, apologies, grocery lists, and birthday cards. I remember thinking foolishly and fiercely that if this hand still belonged to me, then my goodbye did too. But anger at 79 is not like anger at 40. At 40, it rises hot and makes you loud. At 79, it has to move around blood pressure pills, fear of being called dramatic, and the knowledge that people can use your emotion against you. So I said, "I want the plan put back." Michael said, "Let's not do this today." That is how many things are taken from older people. Not with a shout, with a postponement. The next Sunday he came with Jenna. They brought almond pastries, though I had told them twice my dentures did not like almonds. Jenna put the box on my counter, opened her tablet, and spoke as if we were at a meeting. "Eleanor, we're trying to reduce conflict. You know your sister hasn't spoken to Michael since Thomas's funeral." "My sister and I have our own troubles," I said. "That doesn't give you permission to remove my service." Jenna's face softened. I had learned by then to be wary of that softness. "You may not remember, but after your hospital scare in December, you said you didn't want fuss." I had said that. I remembered the hospital room, the plastic bracelet, Michael asleep in a chair with his coat over him. I remembered saying, "When my time comes, don't make a fuss." But "don't make a fuss" is not the same as cancel my burial. It is not the same as do not let anyone gather it. Is not the same as change my wishes without asking me while I am still here to answer. That half-truth landed harder than a lie. A lie you can push away. A half-truth sticks to you. Jenna looked at Michael, then back at me. "We are not trying to control you. We are trying to protect your dignity." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it sounded polite enough that I knew other people might believe it. My dignity did not need to be protected from my own wishes. Still, I faltered. I will admit that. I faltered because I had been tired in December. I had said things loosely. I had needed help with forms. I had forgotten Lily's call. A person does not need to be confused for other people to make them feel unreliable. They only need to have been human in front of witnesses. After they left, I stood in my hallway and looked at Thomas's photograph. He was younger in it than I am now, wearing that brown jacket he loved, though it made him look like a retired geography teacher. I said aloud, "Did I do this to myself?" The house did not answer. Maybe that is why I liked being alone there. At least the walls did not repeat my worry back as evidence. For 2 weeks I did nothing. That may sound weak. It was not weakness, exactly. It was the heavy arithmetic older people do in private. If I pushed Michael, would he stop coming to fix things? If I upset Jenna, would holidays become colder? If I called the funeral home, would they note somewhere that I was agitated? If I asked Lily, would I drag a young woman into a fight between her father and grandmother? If I spent money on advice, would I have enough for the roof repair I had postponed since spring? Younger people sometimes say, "Just stand up for yourself," as if standing costs nothing. At my age, it can cost Sunday visits, rides to appointments, and the easy voice your child used to have on the phone. The first social cut was small. Ruth, my friend from the library group, stopped by with a bag of large print mysteries and did not come inside. Ruth and I had known each other for 20 years. She was the kind of friend who would tell you if your blouse was inside out and then pretend no one had noticed. That day, she kept 1 foot on the porch. "I heard you're making some changes," she said. "What changes?" She looked at the lilacs instead of at me, with arrangements, end-of-life things. Jenna said, "You're keeping it very private now." I felt something small and cold move through me. I didn't change that. Ruth shifted the bag from one hand to the other. "Well, families know things we don't, I suppose." There it was, not accusation, not cruelty, something more ordinary and more painful. A friend choosing the safest version of events because the truth would require involvement. I wanted to tell her everything. Instead, I thanked her for the books and watched her hurry down the path. She was not being cruel. That almost made it worse. That afternoon, I called the funeral home. A young receptionist answered. I gave my name. I gave my date of birth. I explained that I had received an updated confirmation I had not authorized. There was clicking on a keyboard, then a voice, lowered by half an inch. "It looks like your file was updated after a family consultation." I was not in that consultation. More clicking. "I see a note that your son and daughter-in-law were assisting with practical arrangements due to health concerns." Health concerns. I pressed my thumb into the edge of the table until it hurt. "I am the client," I said. "Yes, Mrs. Price, I understand. But because there are recent notes on the file, I'll need to have a director call you back." "When?" "I'm not sure. They're with families today. Families." Again that word. I hung up and felt ashamed, though I had done nothing shameful. That is a quiet punishment older people know too well, being made to feel impolite for asking about something that belongs to you. The director did call back 2 days later. Not the woman I had worked with years earlier. She had retired. This director was younger, careful, and professional. He explained that the funeral home could not discuss all file access details over the phone without verification, but he could schedule an appointment with me. "Bring a family member if that would be easier," he added. I know he probably meant nothing by it. But I heard what older ears hear after enough small humiliations. Bring someone younger. Bring someone steady. Bring proof that your own voice still counts. I scheduled the appointment and did not tell Michael. The morning I went, I wore my gray wool coat, though it was too warm for it. I cannot explain why. It made me feel less easy to move aside. The funeral home smelled of lilies and furniture polish. The lobby had soft lamps, soft carpet, soft voices, as if death were a guest who disliked hard surfaces. The director took me into a room with a round table. He had my file in front of him, not the original brown folder I remembered, but a digital printout and a few scanned pages. He asked gently what concerned me. I placed the update letter on the table. "That was sent to me," I said. "I did not request it." He looked at it, then at the screen. I watched his face for the small change people try to hide. "I can see the plan was modified in May," he said. "I did not modify it in May. The request came through the family contact email. I never change my email." He turned the screen slightly away, not rudely, but enough that I understood there were rules. I understood there were rules. I also understood how often rules make older people wait outside their own lives. "I'll need to review the authorization history," he said. "There may have been a misunderstanding. I have heard that word before. It often arrives before anyone is ready to say mistake. Misunderstanding." I asked whether my original plan was still on file. He said yes, but it had been superseded by the updated instructions. I asked who superseded it. He said the file listed Michael as the assisting family contact and Jenna as the practical contact for coordination. I asked when I gave Jenna that role. He said the note referenced a phone call after my December hospital stay. I remembered no such phone call. Then, with a polite discomfort that made me feel both pitied and suspected, he said, "Mrs. Price, I do want to ask directly. Were you comfortable with your family helping manage these arrangements?" I looked at him for a moment. "No," I said. "I was comfortable with them helping me carry groceries. I was not comfortable with them changing where I am laid to rest." He wrote that down. It was the first sentence anyone had written down in my favor, but it did not fix the file. He gave me copies of what he could release that day, the original summary, the updated confirmation, and a form showing that the mailing address had stayed the same while the email contact had been changed. He would need time, he said, to review the audit trail and speak with staff. He also said something that kept me awake that night. There is a note here that family expressed concern about possible cognitive decline. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Possible cognitive decline is a phrase that can follow an older person like a shadow, even when it is written by someone who has no right to diagnose anything. It does not have to prove you are incapable. It only has to make every objection sound suspicious. On the bus home, I folded the papers inside my handbag and stared at my reflection in the window. I looked old, not dramatically old, just honestly old. The skin under my chin had softened. My left eyelid drooped more when I was tired. There was a tiny stain on my coat cuff where tea had splashed. I wondered whether the world had been slowly taking my outline away, and I had only noticed because someone touched off the wrong thing. When I got home, Michael's car was in my driveway. He was waiting on the porch, phone in hand, jaw tight. Jenna was not with him. "The funeral home called me," he said. "Good," I answered. "Then they know how to reach you when they correct it." He looked hurt. That hurt me, which made me angry at myself. "Mom, why are you making this adversarial?" I almost smiled at the size of the word. Adversarial, not hurt, not worried, not betrayed, adversarial. I am asking why my wishes were changed while I am alive. We were trying to help. "You keep saying that, because it's true." Help asks. He looked away. The silence after that was worse than shouting, because I could feel him choosing which version of me to believe. his mother, or the fragile old woman Jenna had been describing to him in careful pieces. Then he said, "You've been more forgetful. You know you have." There it was. A small truth, set down where he could use it. I had been more forgetful. I had misplaced my checkbook. I had written Lily's call on the wrong day. I had once left the stove on low under an empty pan, until the kitchen smelled scorched. I had told Michael about that myself, foolishly, because I was frightened and because he was my son. But forgetting a pan is not consent to erase a grave. I told him to leave. He did not at first. He stood there, stunned, perhaps because old mothers are expected to absorb disappointment like furniture absorbs dust. Then he went down the steps. At the car door, he turned and said, "Jenna was right. You're not thinking about what this will do to the family." After he drove away, I locked the door and leaned my back against it. That night I slept 3 hours. The next morning, I found that I had been removed from the family planning chat. Not the whole family chat. Just a smaller group I had not known existed until Lily called me with a voice too bright to be natural. "Grandma," she said, "did Dad mean to send that message about you?" "What message?" A pause. "I don't think he meant for me to see it." I sat down. Lily was 24 then, old enough to know adults lie and young enough to still be wounded by it. She had been studying 2 states away and working part-time at a school office. She was not a child, but she was still my grandchild, and I hated pulling her into the middle. "Read it," I said. She did not want to. I could hear it. Then she did. It was from Michael to Jenna and someone else unnamed in the thread, probably a cousin. "Mom went to the funeral home alone. She's escalating. We may need to keep things simple and avoid giving her more documents to fixate on." Fixate. I had become a woman fixating on her own burial. Lily apologized as if she had written it herself. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. Then, before I could stop myself, I said, "Do you think I'm losing my mind?" There was a little breath on the line. "No," she said. "Not quickly, carefully. But I think everyone is scared, and when people are scared, they like one person to be in charge." That was Lily. Gentle enough to love her father, honest enough not to excuse him completely. She asked me to send her photos of the envelope and the documents. I said no at first. I said I would handle it. Pride is hard to put down when you have already lost so many other things. Lily did not argue. She only said, "Then write down dates. Every date you remember. Don't decide yet what matters." It was a small piece of advice. It did not save me. It gave me one next step. That afternoon I took a lined notebook from the desk and wrote at the top, "My own goodbye." I wrote December hospital stay. I wrote February missed birthday call. I wrote May update according to funeral home. I wrote August envelope received. I wrote Michael said, "We've already decided." I wrote Ruth said Jenna told her I wanted it private. I wrote cognitive decline note. Some dates were exact. Some were my best memory, and I marked them that way because I did not want to make myself more certain than I was. The list looked thin. Too thin to stand against family confidence, but it was mine. For the next several days I moved through my ordinary life with a private file growing on my table. I bought milk. I watered the basil. I sorted laundry. I also checked drawers, read old emails, and called the library to ask whether I had ever canceled the meeting room note I had made 5 years earlier for memorial tea. The librarian on the phone sounded confused, then embarrassed, then cautious. "There was an inquiry in May," she said. "From me?" "No, from your daughter-in-law, I believe." She asked about canceling a tentative future hold. We told her those holds aren't formal reservations, just notes. What did she say? The librarian hesitated. She said the family was moving away from public events. The family was moving away. Not Eleanor was changing her mind. The family. When I hung up, I wrote that down too. It was not proof of wrongdoing. It was not enough to make anyone gasp, but it showed movement. They had not only changed a funeral home form, they had started visiting the places where my wishes lived and speaking as if I had stepped away from them. A week later, a bill arrived from the funeral home for an administrative change fee. It was not a large bill, but it was enough to make me sit down. $175 charged to the card on file. My card. I called the number and asked why a fee for changes I did not request had been charged to me. The receptionist said she would have accounting review it. I asked for a statement by mail. She said email would be faster. Mail, I said. She paused. Of course. That one word, of course, carried all the impatience people try to hide from older customers. Mail is slower. Mail is inconvenient. Mail is evidence you can hold. When the statement came, it showed the fee posted in May, the same week the plan was changed. The payment method was the card I had originally provided for the prepaid arrangement years earlier. I had not given anyone permission to use it for revisions. The charge had not ruined me. That was not the point. The point was that even a small fee can feel like a stranger stepping over your threshold. I put the statement in the folder. Then I did something I should have done sooner. I called an elder law attorney. I did not choose one from a television advertisement. I asked the senior center for a list of local attorneys who handled planning documents. The receptionist there gave me 3 names and a warning. Initial consultations were not always free. The attorney I saw was not warm in the way television lawyers are warm. She was practical. She had silver hair cut short, reading glasses on a chain, and a desk with no family photos. I liked that. Family photos make some offices feel like moral traps. She read the papers, asked questions, and did not once say, "At your age," she did say, "This may be more about control than law." But control can show up in paperwork. I asked if what they had done was illegal. She did not give me a dramatic answer. She said funeral preferences and pre-need arrangements depend on documentation, authorization, and state rules, and that families often have practical roles after death. But while I was alive and competent, my written wishes and direct instructions mattered. She would not promise outcomes. She would not threaten anyone. She suggested 3 steps. Request the full file from the funeral home in writing. Revoke any third-party contact authority in writing. And update my own planning documents with clear current instructions and chosen contacts. Then she told me her fee for helping draft the letters. I looked at the number and thought about the roof. That was the cost no one sees in neat stories about standing up for yourself. Even a small defense of your own name can come with a bill. I paid for 1 hour, not more. We drafted 2 letters. One to the funeral home, requesting copies of my file, change history, notes, and confirmation of any current authorized contacts. One to Michael and Jenna, written in plain language, stating that I had not authorized changes to my funeral plan, that I was revoking permission for them to communicate on my behalf about those arrangements, and that future discussions would happen directly with me, or not at all. The attorney said, send them by a trackable method and keep copies. That was all. No courtroom, no thunder, just copies. When I left her office, I sat in my car for 10 minutes because my knees were trembling. I had done something small and formal against my own son. There is no way to make that feel clean. Michael did not call when he received the letter. Jenna did. Her voice was calm enough to curdle milk. "Eleanor, involving an attorney is a very serious step." "So was changing my burial. We did not change your burial. We updated arrangements to reflect what you told us." "No, you did say you didn't want fuss." "I also said I wanted to be beside Thomas." "You say many things at different times." "That's the difficulty." There it was again, dressed as concern. "I am going to hang up now," I said. "Before you do, think about Michael. This is hurting him." I almost apologized. It rose in me like a reflex. Mothers apologize for pain even when pain is not their doing. Instead, I said, "He is not the only one being hurt," and hung up. My hands shook so badly afterward that I spilled tea on the counter. I cried then, not in a noble way. I cried with my mouth twisted, angry at myself for crying, angry at Thomas for being dead, angry at Michael for making me choose between peace and self-respect. The full file from the funeral home arrived 11 days later. It came in a large envelope with a printed cover letter. I opened it at the kitchen table, the same place where I had once helped Michael with multiplication. There were copies of my original plan, my original signature, the sealed personal note listed but not included, and a scanned form from May labeled Arrangement Preference Update. The form had no signature from me. It had checkboxes, typed notes, and a line. Family states client prefers no public gathering. Client increasingly overwhelmed by details. Client. I stared at that word until it became almost funny. When people want your money, you are Mrs. Price. When they want to manage your wishes without trouble, you become client. There was also an email printout. The sender was Jenna. The subject line, Re. Eleanor Price Arrangements, Simplifying per Discussion. I read it slowly. Jenna had written that I had expressed wanting no fuss, that my health had become variable, and that Michael was anxious to prevent family conflict around Eleanor's eventual passing. She asked whether direct cremation would be more peaceful and cost-conscious. She asked that future confirmations go to her email, so Eleanor is not upset by administrative details. There it was, not proof of everything, but not nothing either. The funeral home employee had replied that changes to core preferences should ideally be confirmed directly with the client, but they could update contact preferences and prepare a revised summary for review. Then, a week later, a note said, "Family confirmed, client agreeable. Send update by post for records." For records. They had sent the record to me after they had treated silence as agreement. I called Lily and read parts of it. She was quiet for a long time. "Grandma," she said, "Dad may believe this. I know, that makes it harder. I know that too. That is the hard part with family. Sometimes the person hurting you has told himself he is being responsible." Lily asked if she could talk to her father. I said no. Then I said yes. Then I said, "Do what you can live with." I was learning not to command loyalty from the people I loved. I had seen enough control dressed up as care. I did not want to do the same thing to her. 2 days later, she called again. Her voice was rough. "He says Jenna handled details because you get overwhelmed." "I do get overwhelmed," I said. "Grandma, no, it's true. I do. But that doesn't mean I disappear." Lily cried a little then. I think it frightened her to hear an older person admit weakness without surrendering authority. I think that is what frightened her. Families often want old people to be one thing or the other, fully fine or fully manageable. The middle is where most of us actually live. The next pressure came from church, though I had not expected church to be involved. I did not attend every Sunday anymore. My hip did not enjoy the pews, and the new microphone system made everything echo. But I went once or twice a month. After the funeral home file arrived, I went because I needed to sit somewhere that had known me before this mess. After the service, a woman from the hospitality table touched my sleeve and said, "How brave of you to keep things so simple." I told Jenna my mother wanted no service too, and it was a blessing. I felt the room tilt slightly. "What did Jenna tell you?" Her smile weakened. "Oh, only that you didn't want people making a fuss when the time came. I think that's very considerate." Considerate. I had become considerate in advance against my will. Across the room, Ruth saw me and looked down into her coffee. That hurt more than the woman's comment. Ruth knew me. Ruth knew about Thomas. Ruth had sat beside me at his funeral and heard me whisper, "I want to be beside him when my time comes." But knowing is not the same as saying. Many people know. Far fewer say. I went home before the final hymn finished. That afternoon, I added another page to the notebook. Who has been told what? I listed Ruth, library, funeral home, church hospitality, maybe cousins, maybe Michael's friends. The pattern was not loud, but it was spreading. Jenna had not merely adjusted a form. She had created a social fact. If enough people believed I wanted no service, then by the time I died, anyone asking for my real wishes would look like the troublemaker. That was the point of changing a goodbye early. By the time I was gone, the wrong story would already feel familiar. The attorney reviewed the file and said the funeral home appeared concerned now. They had not admitted wrongdoing. Organizations rarely begin with admission. They begin with review. She suggested a meeting. Me, the funeral director, Michael, Jenna if I wanted, and the attorney if I chose to pay for her time. I asked how much it would cost for her to attend. She told me. I thought of the roof again. Then I thought of Thomas's grave. I asked her to come for the first hour only. The week before the meeting, Jenna sent me a long email. Long emails can look kinder than they are, especially when every sentence is arranged neatly. She wrote that she respected me, that she loved Michael, that she had no desire to override me. She wrote that after my hospital scare, I had become emotionally inconsistent about end-of-life matters. She wrote that direct cremation was not erasure, but simplicity. She wrote that public services often become performative. She wrote that burial plots were costly to maintain and that Michael was under enormous stress. Then she attached a photo, not like an accusation exactly, more like proof that she had been reasonable all along. It was a photo of me asleep in a hospital chair in December, mouth slightly open, blanket crooked, looking old in the way no one wants to be photographed. Under it she had written, "This was when we realized you needed less strain." I sat there looking at that photo, and for one terrible minute, shame nearly did what Jenna could not. I looked frail, I looked unaware. I looked like a woman people might need to protect from details. Then I noticed the cup on the table beside the hospital chair. I remembered that night. I had not been a patient. Michael had been in the emergency department with chest pain that turned out to be reflux and stress. I had fallen asleep while waiting with him. Jenna's photo made it look like evidence of my decline because she removed the reason I was there. A half-truth again. I printed the email and added it to the folder. At the meeting, Michael would barely look at me. Jenna looked perfect. The funeral director looked as if he had slept badly. My attorney sat beside me with a yellow pad and said very little. The meeting room had a bowl of wrapped mints in the center of the table. I remember that more clearly than I remember some of the exact words. Strange, the things the mind keeps. The funeral director began by saying the funeral home had reviewed the file history and wanted to clarify current instructions directly with me. That was a careful sentence. It did not blame anyone. It did not heal anything. But for the first time in weeks, the question was being asked to me. Jenna spoke first. "We all want what Eleanor wants," she said. My attorney looked at her over her glasses. "Then today should be simple." For the first time, Jenna's face tightened. Michael said, "Mom told us no fuss." I said, "I did." He looked relieved, as if I had finally stepped into the role written for me. Then I continued, "No fuss means no fighting over flowers. No fuss means no speeches from people who did not visit. It does not mean no service. It does not mean no burial. It does not mean changing my contact email without asking me." The funeral director placed a printout on the table. He said the records showed my email contact had been changed through a request from Jenna's email, with Michael copied. He said there was no signed authorization from me for that change in the paper file. He said the updated plan had been generated based on family representations and mailed to me, which was now under internal review. Internal review. Dry words. But I felt my lungs open a little. Jenna said, "Eleanor asked us to handle practical details." My attorney asked, "Do you have that in writing?" Jenna did not answer immediately. Michael said, "It was verbal." My attorney nodded. Verbal conversations can be misunderstood. That is why written confirmation from the person whose arrangements are being changed matters. No one shouted. No one confessed. There was only the uncomfortable shuffle of papers and the feeling that the tidy story did not fit anymore. Then Jenna brought out the hospital photo. She slid it across the table as if it explained me. "This was the week we started worrying," she said. I looked at the photo. My attorney looked at the photo. The funeral director looked at the photo with visible unease. I said, "That was the night Michael was in the emergency room. I was waiting with him." Michael's face changed, not dramatically, just enough. "She was there for me," he said quietly. Jenna looked at him. "She was exhausted," Jenna said. "Yes," he replied, "because she was there for me. That did not solve everything. One sentence does not mend a family, but it changed the air in the room." The funeral director then mentioned the church and library inquiries. He had not contacted them. I had brought notes. My attorney did not present them like courtroom evidence. She simply asked whether the funeral home had advised family members to communicate revised wishes to community contacts before direct confirmation from me. The director said no. Jenna's expression sharpened. "I was trying to prevent confusion later." I said, "You created it now." Jenna's hand moved to her folder. For a second, I thought she was going to pull out another paper, another careful sentence, another reason my life would be easier if I stopped insisting on it. Instead, she looked at Michael. "Are you going to let her speak to me like that?" she asked. That was the moment I heard it plainly. Not in the records, not in the emails, in her voice. She did not want Michael to hear me. She wanted him to manage me. Michael looked from her to me. His face did not become noble. He did not suddenly understand everything. He only looked tired and ashamed, but he did not defend her. "Jenna," he said, "stop. It was a small word. Too late. Not enough." Still, it was the first time he had put a hand on the door she had been using to walk through my life. That was the harshest part of the meeting, not because anyone shouted, but because the room finally saw what I had been trying to name. Michael rubbed his face. He looked older than he had the week before. I remembered him at 7, crying, because he had broken Thomas's tape measure and thought we would stop loving him. A mother remembers too many versions of her child. It makes even deserved anger hurt. The meeting ended with practical steps. The funeral home would restore my original plan as the active instruction, remove Jenna's email as contact. Note that all future changes required direct written confirmation from me and refund the administrative change fee. They would also provide a letter stating that the May update had not been confirmed directly with me and should not be treated as my final preference. It was not an apology. It was not warm. It was a correction. At that point, a correction was more useful than sympathy. Outside, in the parking lot, Michael asked to speak to me alone. Jenna walked to the car and stood by it with her arms folded. "Mom," he said, "I didn't understand how far it had gone. I wanted to say, you did not want to understand. But I was tired." "You let her speak for me," I said. He nodded once. "I thought she was helping." "So did I," he cried then, just a little, which made me want to comfort him, because that is the old habit. I had to put both hands around my handbag to keep from reaching out too quickly. "I'm sorry," he said. "It was not enough, but it was something." I asked whether he had told people I was declining. He had said I was having a harder time with details. He had not thought of it as an accusation. That may have been true. Many harmful things begin as softer words. I told him I needed time. "How much?" he asked. "I don't know." I did not answer. For once I let not knowing be enough. The formal letter came from the funeral home 2 weeks later. It was 2 pages, plain and careful. It said my original preferences were reinstated. It said prior revisions had been based on family communications, not directly confirmed by me. It said my file would require direct written instruction for any future changes. It said the administrative fee had been refunded. The letter did not say I was right. It did not say Jenna had lied. It did not say Michael had failed me. It did not say Ruth had been a coward, or that church people had repeated a story because it was easier than asking me. But it said enough. I took that letter to the bank and updated my safe deposit box instructions. I took it to the attorney and updated my healthcare proxy, financial power of attorney, and final disposition, instructions with wording, she said, was clear enough to reduce confusion. I did not make Lily responsible for everything. That would have been another kind of burden. I named her as a person to notify, not a person to carry the whole weight. I named a professional fiduciary service for certain administrative pieces because love and authority had already become too tangled in my house. That decision upset Michael more than the funeral meeting. "You don't trust me now?" he asked. "I trust you to be my son," I said. "I do not trust you to be the only gate between me and my own decisions." He looked wounded. I let him be wounded. That was new for me. Jenna did not apologize, not really. She sent a message saying she regretted any distress caused by practical misunderstandings. I printed it and almost laughed. Practical misunderstandings. Even her apology avoided touching the thing directly. Months passed. The roof got patched, not replaced. I cut back on little things to pay the attorney bill. I stopped buying the expensive marmalade I liked. I canceled a magazine subscription. No one writes much about that part. The truth may help you breathe, but postage, copies, consultations, and taxis still have to be paid. Ruth came by in October with more books. This time she came inside. She stood in my kitchen, looking smaller than usual, and said, "I should have asked you directly." "Yes," I said. She waited for me to make it easy. I did not. I didn't know what to believe, she said. That would have been a good reason to ask. Her eyes filled. Mine did not. I had spent mine already. She told me she had heard Jenna say at the church coffee table that I was not up to visitors or public things anymore, and that she, Ruth, had felt uneasy. But she did not want to interfere in family matters. She did not want to embarrass me. She did not want to be wrong. I understood most of it. I forgave some of it. I did not pretend those were the same thing. We are friendly now, Ruth and I, but not as before. We still have tea sometimes, but I notice what I did not notice before. As for Michael, we found our way into a narrower relationship. Narrower, but more honest. He visits every other Sunday. He asks before opening drawers now. The first time he did, we both noticed. He said, "Where do you keep the extension cord?" and then waited in the hallway like a guest. It hurt. It also helped. Lily came home for Thanksgiving. She helped me make the dressing, though she put too much sage in it. After dinner, while Michael washed dishes and Jenna sat stiffly in the living room, Lily asked if I wanted to show her the folder. I did. Not because I expected her to manage my death. Because I wanted one person under 40 to understand that planning is not the same as surrender. We sat at the cedar desk. I showed her the funeral home letter, the attorney documents, the list of contacts, the sealed personal note. On the envelope I had written, "To be read only after I am gone, and only if people begin speaking over me again." Lily touched the edge of it. "What does it say?" she asked. I smiled. "It says I loved you all. It also says I was not furniture." She laughed, then cried. I patted her hand because I did not know what else to do. The following spring, I went back to the funeral home alone. I asked to review the plan one more time, not because I doubted it, but because I wanted to sit across from someone and hear the words out loud. Burial beside Thomas, small chapel. No open casket, one hymn. The poem, tea at the library if available. No one to override written wishes based on convenience. Direct confirmation required. The director read it carefully. When he finished, he said, "Mrs. Price, would you like to add anything? I thought about Jenna. I thought about Michael. I thought about Ruth on the porch. I thought about the hospital photo and the way shame had almost silenced me. Then I said, yes. Add that I am making these wishes while fully present, and that simplicity should not be used as an excuse to erase gathering, memory, or burial." He typed slowly. I watched his fingers and felt no triumph, only steadiness. On the way home, I stopped at Thomas's grave. The grass needed trimming around the stone. I knelt carefully, which is not as graceful as it once was, and pulled weeds from the edge. His name was still clear. Mine was not there yet, though the space beside his had been waiting for years. I used to think that space was only about death. Now I know it is also about who gets listened to while they are still alive. I sat on the bench until my hip complained. A young couple walked past with flowers. Somewhere nearby, a mower started. Life at cemeteries is always less quiet than people imagine. Birds argue. Cars pass. Someone laughs too loudly at the wrong distance. The world does not always lower its voice for our private moments. That comforted me, because my story did not end with the restored plan. It did not end with the letter. It did not end with Michael's apology, or Jenna's non-apology, or Ruth's late regret. Those were only documents and conversations. Useful, yes. Necessary, yes. But they could not give me back the months I spent wondering whether I had become unreliable in my own life. They could not give me back the easy trust I used to have when someone said, "I'm only helping." I am more careful now. I keep copies. I ask people to put things in writing. I do not hand over passwords unless I understand why and for how long. I do not let anyone use less stress as a reason to remove my voice. Some people think that makes me difficult. Maybe it does. There are worse things than being called difficult. Being easy to erase is one of them. There was one more small humiliation I have not mentioned because it was not dramatic, and perhaps that is why it stayed with me. In January, I went to renew my driver information at a local office, not for any grand reason, just paperwork that comes around when you have lived long enough. The clerk asked for an emergency contact. For years I had written Michael. My pen hovered above the line so long that the clerk looked up. "Need a minute?" she asked. I nodded. It is a strange thing, changing an emergency contact. It looks like nothing to the person behind the counter. A name, a number, a box completed. But to me it felt like moving a photograph from the mantel to a drawer. Not throwing it away, not pretending it meant nothing. Just admitting it could no longer stand in the same place. I wrote Lily's name first, then the professional contact second, for documents only. I did not remove Michael from my life. I removed him from the position where love and authority had become tangled. When I told him later, he went quiet. Not angry, quiet. "I suppose I earned that," he said. I wanted to make him feel better. That old mothering muscle twitched again. But I had learned something by then. Comfort given too quickly can become permission for nothing to change. So I said, "You did not earn losing me, but you did earn losing automatic access." That sentence sat between us for weeks. It was not pretty, it was useful. Jenna became more formal after that. Birthday cards came signed in her neat hand, with warm wishes, as if we had once worked in neighboring offices. At Christmas, she gave me a soft blanket in a department store box. I thanked her. I even use it. Life is not always clean enough to reject every object touched by someone who hurt you. Some evenings that blanket warms my knees while I watch the news, and I do not know exactly what to feel about it. Months later, the senior center asked me to say a few words after a planning workshop. I nearly said no. I did not want to become an example, and I certainly did not want strangers looking at me as if my private hurt had been placed on a table for them to inspect. In the end, I went for 10 minutes. I did not tell the whole story. I only said, if someone is helping with your papers, make sure they are doing it with you, not instead of you. Afterward, a woman stayed behind with a blank worksheet folded in both hands. She said her son had offered to tidy up her documents. She smiled when she said it, but her fingers kept pressing the paper smaller and smaller. I did not tell her what to do. I only asked, "Will he be tidying with you or for you?" She looked down at the worksheet for a long time. That was enough. Not a movement, not a victory tour. Just one woman leaving with a question she could still answer for herself. I do not know how much time I have left. None of us does, though older people are expected to think about it more politely. I know that when my time comes, there will still be some awkwardness. Jenna may stand too close to Michael. Ruth may cry harder than our friendship now deserves. Someone may think the tea is too plain. Someone may say I was stubborn. Let them. My goodbye does not need to make everyone comfortable. It only needs to be mine. And if you have a folder somewhere in your house, or wishes spoken once and never written, or a grown child who says they are, just making things easier, I will leave you with one question I wish someone had asked me sooner. Are they helping you carry your voice? Or are they practicing how to speak after it is gone? You do not have to answer that question to anyone else, but answer it to yourself while you are still here to change the paperwork. As for me, the folder is back in the cedar desk. The corrected letter is in front. My original note is still sealed. Thomas's grave is still waiting, and while I am here, I will be the one who says what it means.